Let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're traveling back to an ancient society where everything looked absolutely perfect on paper, but was secretly falling apart in reality. We're diving into a really fascinating breakdown of social order, specifically focusing on Chapter 3 of this analysis, the Confucian Diagnosis. And honestly, it forces us to ask some pretty uncomfortable questions about the rules that hold our own world together. Picture this. You live in a world where every single social rule is followed to a T. Every ceremony is flawlessly executed. The rulers are performing the exact correct sacrifices, the ministers are bowing at the precise right angles, and yet, the entire fabric of society is unraveling right in front of you. That was the bizarre reality of the Zhou dynasty in China around the 6th century BCE. The dissonance must have been deafening. You had the persistence of all these strict ceremonial forms existing right alongside the complete and total erosion of their actual social effect. Looking at the timeline here, you can literally watch this disaster unfold over centuries. For about 400 years, starting around 1046 BCE, the Zhou social system functioned smoothly. The rules were tacit, meaning people just lived them naturally through everyday participation, rather than looking them up in some rulebook. But skip ahead to 771 BCE, and fractures really begin to show thanks to population growth and military shifts. By 550 BCE, the society had morphed into this hollow theatrical shell of its former self. The rules were definitely still there, but they had absolutely zero practical effect on actually coordinating the society.
That brings us to Part 1, the Confucian Diagnosis, taking a medical approach to the problem. While other thinkers looked at this chaos and blamed the system itself, arguing the rules were structurally broken, Confucius took a totally different, almost counterintuitive approach. He looked at the mess and economically identified the real root of the problem, saying the ceremonies are performed but humaneness is absent. He was essentially saying, guys, the societal rules aren't broken at all. The people performing them are empty. The forms themselves are totally sound. It's the human agents enacting them that have degraded.
What he's pointing out here is the massive gap between merely playing a role, like an actor hitting their marks on a stage, and genuinely possessing the moral substance required for that social position. This wasn't just some abstract failure of a theory, it was the failure of a lived practice. The people enacting the rules completely lacked the internal disposition to match the external forms they were performing. They were just going through the motions, a total theatrical performance. And that brings us to the secret sauce of this whole system, Ren. This is the missing ingredient. It roughly translates to humaneness or genuine virtue. Ren is the internal achievement that actually makes the external rules of a society work properly. Without Ren, a ritual is just empty formalism, right? It's a correctly enacted physical move that achieves absolutely nothing for social harmony.
Moving right along to Part 2, Restoration over Construction.
Because of this specific diagnosis, Confucius proposed something pretty radical for his time. He wasn't trying to invent a brand new society from scratch with new laws like a lot of his rivals wanted to do. His whole goal was the radical restoration of the tacit rules that already existed in the Zhou practice. To get a real feel for how this works, let's look at this famous case study involving his student Zaiwo. Zaiwo comes to Confucius and basically asks to shortcut the traditional 3-year mourning period for a deceased parent. He argues that 1 year is plenty of time and that society would suffer if everyone paused their lives for 3 whole years. Now, the way Confucius handles this is brilliant. He doesn't flip out, he doesn't start quoting a rulebook, he just asks him, would you feel at ease eating fine food and wearing nice clothes after only 1 year? Zaiwo says, yeah, actually, I would. And Confucius simply replies, then go ahead and do it. But as soon as Zaiwo leaves the room, Confucius remarks on his total lack of humaneness. You see, Confucius wasn't acting like a cop enforcing a rigid regulation. He was pointing out that the ritual is supposed to be the expression of an internal state of grief. Because think about it. If Zaiwo genuinely feels totally fine and at ease after just 1 year, forcing him to perform a 3-year mourning ritual would just be more of that empty theatrical faking. It would completely defeat the purpose of a constitutive rule. The rule isn't some regulation imposed on you from the outside, it's the natural social expression of a genuine internal state. If the internal state isn't there, the rule is meaningless.
Okay, let's get into Part 3, the cultivation wager, or manufacturing virtue.
This whole concept raises a really massive gamble. If a functioning society relies completely on the genuine virtue of its people, can we actually cultivate that virtue in a population that seemingly lost it entirely? This sparked a massive debate in classical Chinese philosophy. On one side, you've got Gaozi, who argued human nature is totally neutral and plastic, like a block of willow wood that you have to forcefully carve into a bowl. But Mencius argued against this. He said human nature already has these natural good sprouts inside it that just need to be watered.
The entire Confucian restoration project relies completely on Mencius being right. They are banking on practice to organically draw out those natural sprouts of virtue rather than just forcing behavioral compliance. If Gaozi is right and you have to force morality onto people from the outside like carving wood, well, then you're just creating another layer of theatrical faking.
So to actually cultivate these internal sprouts, Confucius essentially built an educational laboratory with three main pillars. First up is textual study, using things like the book of poetry to refine the students' emotions. Second is ritual practice, deliberately used to align their internal feelings with those external forms. And third, and definitely the most important, is exemplary modeling. It's this idea of mimetic transmission. The text uses this incredible metaphor. The virtue of a true leader is like the wind, and the common people are like grass. When the wind blows, the grass naturally bends. You transmit virtue by genuinely embodying it, not by shouting a bunch of laws at people.
But of course, nothing is ever that simple, which brings us to part 4, the paradox of articulation, a pretty massive structural flaw in the whole plan.
Just when it seems like Confucius has found the perfect cure, we hit a huge complication. Because the original Zhou rules were tacit, meaning they were just lived naturally without anyone ever needing to spell them out or write them down, Confucius faces a fatal paradox the exact moment he tries to explicitly teach them. Can you actually restore tacit rules by speaking them out loud? Let's walk through this trap step by step, because the irony here is kind of staggering. Step 1. A healthy society lives its rules tacitly, naturally. Step 2. Society degrades and people lose that inner virtue. Step 3. Confucius comes along and has to explicitly articulate the rules to save them. But then step 4. By putting those unspoken rules into explicit words, he inadvertently creates a manual, a literal script. And who uses that script? The very people with no moral substance. They now have a step-by-step guide on exactly how to fake being virtuous. The crazy thing is, the exact act of articulation that was necessary to try and save the society also handed everyone the exact tools they needed for its theatrical degradation. So I'll leave you with this provocative thought from the explainer. When we try to codify human decency, when we write down the exact rules for how to be a good person, do we actually save society, or do we just teach the world how to put on a much better mask? Definitely something to think about the next time you read through a corporate code of conduct.